Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Council adjusted his breathing apparatus for the 15th time as his shuttle descended through Earth's impossibly dense atmosphere. The readings on his scanner kept fluctuating between extremely hazardous and certain death, which was concerning beyond measure. Ambassador, his aide Zilf whispered, her voice trembling through the calm. Perhaps we should reconsider this mission. The atmospheric pressure alone should crush any civilized being, and the oxygen concentration is 21%. Kethvar finished grimly. I know. It's like breathing pure fire mixed with industrial solvent. He glanced at the preliminary reports again, each page more terrifying than the last. Class 15 Deathworld, minimum. The Council's xenobiologists are still debating whether it should be reclassified as 16. The difference between Class 15 and 16 was significant. Class 15 worlds were considered barely habitable with extensive life support systems and constant medical monitoring. Class 16 worlds were deemed completely unsurvivable for any known sentient species, places where even the most advanced environmental suits would fail within hours. And yet, somehow, impossibly, the humans had not only survived here, they'd thrived for millennia. The shuttle touched down in what the humans called Central Park, in their settlement called New York. Through the reinforced viewport, Kethvar watched in mounting horror as creatures moved about in the open air without any visible protection. Some were even exercising, voluntarily increasing their heart rate and metabolic demands on a world that should kill them just by existing. Sir, Zilpha's voice cracked like breaking crystal. One of them is approaching. It's not wearing any protection at all. A tall, brown-haired human in strange blue coverings walked toward their shuttle with what appeared to be a welcoming gesture. No breathing apparatus. No environmental suit. No radiation shielding. No temperature regulation gear. Nothing but thin fabric covering exposed skin. Ambassador Kethvar steeled himself, checking his environmental systems one final time, and activated the external communicator. Greetings, human. I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Council. We come in peace. The human's facial features rearranged into what their cultural database indicated was a smile, apparently a positive expression, though it revealed sharp white bone structures that could only be described as predatory. Welcome to Earth. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jessica Walker, Earth's liaison to the Galactic Council. We've been looking forward to meeting you for months. Looking forward to it, as if first contact with aliens was something they scheduled between mundane daily activities. Commander Walker, Kethvar began carefully, his voice modulator struggling to remain steady. We must ask, how are you surviving out there? Our instruments indicate atmospheric pressure that should compress your lungs into paste, radiation levels that should cook your DNA like a protein synthesis, and we detected at least 17 different types of microorganisms that should be lethal to any carbon-based life form. Jessica tilted her head slightly, still maintaining that unsettling tooth display. Oh, you mean like the common cold? Yeah, that stuff builds character. Speaking of which, you guys might want to stay in your suits for a while until you build up some immunity. Earth germs can be pretty rough on first-timers. We had a diplomatic team from Rigel visit last year. They spent 3 weeks in quarantine after catching what we consider a minor flu. Kethvar's aide made a strangled sound through the comm that might have been a prayer to whatever deities her species worshipped. Commander, Kethvar continued, his voice climbing to what he hoped wasn't a panic register. Perhaps you could give us a brief overview of your world's environmental challenges? Jessica's smile somehow became even wider, revealing more of those alarming dental structures. Sure. Where should I start? We've got weather systems that can freeze you solid in minutes or melt your skin off, depending on the season and location. Earthquakes that can swallow entire cities without warning. Volcanoes that can block out the sun for years and turn the atmosphere toxic. Hurricanes with winds that can pick up buildings and throw them for miles. She paused thoughtfully, as if mentally cataloging an endless list of planetary hazards. Oh, and the wildlife. We've got everything from microscopic parasites that can control your brain to massive predators with teeth designed specifically for crushing bone marrow. Poisonous creatures that can kill you with a touch, venomous ones that can kill you with a bite, and some that are both. Plus, about 90% of our ocean is still unexplored because it's too hostile for even us to survive down there without seriously advanced equipment. Too hostile for you? Kethvar whispered, his breathing apparatus fogging with condensation from his stress response. Well, yeah. I mean, at those depths you've got pressure that would compress you into a marble-sized sphere instantly, temperatures near absolute freezing, complete darkness, no breathable atmosphere obviously, and creatures that look like they crawled out of someone's worst nightmares. Some of them glow in the dark, some are basically living acid factories, and some are just, well, let's just say evolution got really creative down there. Obviously, Kethvar repeated faintly, wondering what kind of universe allowed a species to casually describe planet-sized death traps as minor inconveniences. But hey, Jessica continued with terrifying cheerfulness, humans are pretty adaptable. We've learned to work with what we've got. Would you like a tour? I promise we'll stick to the safer areas. The safer areas? Yeah, places where the air won't kill you immediately, the ground is relatively stable, and the local wildlife is mostly harmless. We'll avoid the desert where you can cook to death in hours, the Arctic where you'll freeze solid in minutes, the rainforest where everything wants to eat you or poison you, the mountains where you can fall to your death or suffocate from lack of oxygen, the ocean where you'll drown or be consumed by predators, most major cities during rush hour. As Jessica continued listing off the apparently infinite number of ways their planet could kill visitors, Kethvar began to suspect that the Galactic Council's classification system might need some serious revision. Class 15 Deathworld? This was starting to look like they might need to invent entirely new categories of lethality. Dr. Marcus Webb finished setting up the presentation projector in the United Nations building, completely oblivious to the fact that 3 different alien species were having what appeared to be synchronized anxiety attacks in the observation booth above. The reinforced glass between the presentation hall and the booth was fogging with condensation from their emergency breathing apparatus operating at maximum capacity. Today's presentation covers basic human physiology and survival adaptations, he announced cheerfully to the mixed audience of humans and heavily suited alien diplomats. I thought we'd start with something simple, how humans deal with injury and healing. Ambassador Kethvar exchanged worried glances with his Zephyrian and Tari colleagues through their respective environmental visors. Nothing about humans had been simple so far. Their previous briefings had included humans voluntarily jumping from aircraft, setting themselves on fire for entertainment, and consuming ethanol as a recreational activity. Now, the human body is remarkably resilient. Dr. Webb began, clicking to his first slide showing a detailed human skeleton with highlighted stress points. For instance, our bones can actually heal themselves when broken. The break site often becomes stronger than the original bone structure, essentially self-upgrading our skeletal framework through trauma. A collective gasp arose from the alien observers, their various breathing apparatus creating a symphony of mechanical wheezing. The Tari representative, Ambassador Vesh, activated her translator with trembling manipulator appendages. Excuse me, Dr. Webb, did you say your skeletal structure repairs and reinforces itself through damage? Oh yes, absolutely. Takes about 6 to 8 weeks for a clean break, assuming proper nutrition and rest. The calcium deposits that form during healing create a stronger matrix than the original bone. Some people even break bones recreationally to take advantage of this biological process. Recreationally? 3 alien voices asked in perfect unison, their electronic translators creating an eerie harmony of disbelief. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically, clicking to a video of what appeared to be controlled human madness. Extreme sports, mostly. We've got humans who jump off 1,000-foot cliffs with nothing but fabric wings, throw themselves down mountains on narrow boards at lethal speeds, and purposely crash into each other at high velocities using various vehicles, all for entertainment and the adrenaline rush. The alien observers huddled together in frantic conversation, their various communication methods creating a babble of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. Kethvar caught fragments through the universal translator, deliberate self-harm for pleasure responses. Clearly a species-wide psychological disorder. Need to revise all contact protocols immediately. Possibly contagious madness. Moving on, Dr. Webb continued blithely, Let's talk about human immune systems. We're constantly under attack from millions of microorganisms, most of which we can't even see without magnification. Under attack? Ambassador Vesh's voice cracked like breaking crystal, her species equivalent of a panic response. Every second of every day, our bodies are basically biological battlefields where our immune cells actively hunt down and destroy microscopic invaders in tiny wars that rage throughout our circulatory and lymphatic systems. We've evolved to live in symbiosis with billions of bacteria. The beneficial ones help us digest food, produce vitamins, and fight off the harmful ones in an endless microscopic ecosystem of conflict. The Zephyrian ambassador, Crixtal, raised a shaking appendage, his environmental suit stress indicators flashing warning colors. Dr. Webb, you speak of constant biological warfare within your bodies as if it's normal, acceptable. Well, it is for us. A healthy human adult carries around about 2 to 6 pounds of living bacteria at any given time. We're basically walking ecosystems of microscopic life forms, most of which are either helpful or harmless. But occasionally something particularly nasty manages to establish a foothold and we have to fight it off. Dr. Webb clicked to the next slide, showing magnified images of various pathogens that looked like something from a horror simulation. This is why we have fever responses. When we detect hostile microorganisms, we literally cook ourselves to kill them. Sometimes we raise our body temperature to levels that would be lethal to most Earth species, essentially turning our bodies into furnaces to burn out infections. You cook yourselves? Kethvar's voice was barely audible through his breathing apparatus. Only a few degrees and only temporarily, though I should mention, normal human body temperature is already at a level that most alien species would consider a dangerous fever. We basically run hot all the time compared to most life forms. Our optimal operating temperature would put most species into thermal shock. The aliens were frantically taking notes now, their various recording devices working overtime to document what appeared to be a species of biological impossibilities. Oh, and here's something particularly interesting, Dr. Webb continued, warming to his subject with obvious enthusiasm. Humans can actually survive losing significant portions of their vital organs. We can live with 1 kidney, 1 lung, substantial portions of our liver, which actually grows back like some kind of biological regeneration system, and we've had documented cases of people surviving and functioning normally with most of their brain missing. Their brain missing? Ambassador Vesh's translator struggled to process the concept. Rare condition called hydrocephalus. I once read about a man who lived a completely normal life with only 5% of his brain tissue remaining. Married, had children, held down a complex job, maintained social relationships. Nobody knew about his condition until he received an unrelated brain scan for a minor headache. Dr. Webb paused, finally noticing that the alien observers seemed unusually quiet, their various life signs readings probably screaming warnings on their medical monitors. Are you folks okay up there? You look a bit stressed. Ambassador Kethvar leaned into his communicator with the desperation of someone clinging to sanity. Dr. Webb, could you tell us what humans consider to be a truly dangerous environment? Something that would actually pose a threat to your species. Dangerous? Well, I suppose anywhere we can't survive without significant technological assistance. Deep space, obviously, though we're working on that. The bottom of the ocean trenches. Active volcanic craters, though people do visit those for research and tourism. The polar regions without proper equipment, though that's more of an inconvenience than a real barrier. The polar regions require equipment? Oh sure, you die of exposure in minutes at the poles without protection. Temperatures can drop to -40 or 50 degrees Celsius. That's cold enough to freeze your breath in your lungs and stop your heart. The wind can strip flesh from bone. And people go there? Voluntarily? Dr. Webb grinned with the expression humans reserved for discussing particularly enjoyable activities. All the time, we've got permanent research stations, tourism expeditions, adventure sports. Last year, a guy ran a full marathon at the South Pole. Took him about 6 hours, which isn't bad considering he was basically running through a frozen wasteland where the air is too thin to breathe properly and the surface temperature could kill an unprotected human in minutes. In the observation booth, Ambassador Kethvar was updating his report to the Galactic Council with increasingly frantic modifications. He crossed out Class 15 Deathworld and wrote Class 16. Then he crossed that out and wrote Class 18. Then he crossed that out too. He was starting to think they might need to create an entirely new classification system that went beyond their current understanding of biological impossibility. Safety Inspector Yixmoth of the Galactic Occupational Health Administration thought he had seen everything in his 40 cycles of service. He had investigated workplace accidents on mining worlds where the gravity could crush you into a molecular paste, assessed safety protocols on gas giants where the atmosphere was pure corrosive acid that could dissolve flesh in seconds, and once spent a terrifying month on a world where the local fungi actively tried to colonize your respiratory system and turn you into a mobile spore distribution unit. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what humans casually referred to as workplace safety. "This is our standard construction site," explained Tom Rodriguez, hard hat tilting slightly as he gestured toward the skeletal framework of a skyscraper rising impossibly high into the sky like some kind of metallic mountain designed by madmen. "We're building what will be a 90-story office complex. Should be finished in about 18 months if the weather cooperates." Yixmoth's scanner immediately began screaming warnings so loudly that he had to adjust the audio dampeners. Heights that would cause instant death from falling. Atmospheric pressure fluctuations. Exposure to direct stellar radiation. Structural instability. Wind shear. And the humans were just walking around up there like it was perfectly normal. "Mr. Rodriguez," Yixmoth managed, his voice modulator crackling with stress-induced feedback. "Those workers appear to be operating without any gravitational safety devices. They're moving about freely at altitudes that should require emergency evacuation protocols." "Oh, you mean harnesses?" "Yeah, they've got those. OSHA requires them above 6 feet. Safety first, you know?" Tom pointed to barely visible straps connecting the workers to the building structure. 6 feet. Yixmoth consulted his measurement converter, certain there had been an error. "You consider falling from more than 1.8 meters to be hazardous enough to require safety equipment? Well, you could break something if you land wrong. Maybe crack your skull open, snap your spine, crush some ribs. Nothing too serious if you're lucky. But insurance companies get cranky about workplace injuries." Yixmoth stared at the humans casually working at heights that would be considered suicidal on any civilized world. His species had evolved on a world where a fall of more than 3 feet was considered attempted suicide and required immediate psychological intervention. "Mr. Rodriguez, what do you consider to be a seriously dangerous fall? At what height do humans begin to express concern?" Tom scratched his head thoughtfully, dislodging small particles of construction debris. "I guess anything over 100 feet without proper safety gear gets dicey. That's usually when you start looking at fatal injuries instead of just broken bones and internal bleeding. Though I knew a guy who fell 200 feet off a bridge and survived. Spent 6 months in the hospital, but he came back to work eventually." Fatal injuries. Yixmoth's breathing apparatus began recycling emergency oxygen reserves. He survived a 200-foot fall and returned to construction work. "Yeah, Tony's tough as nails. Though he does complain about his back hurting when it rains now. Want to head up to the top floor? Great view of the city from up there. We'll take the construction elevator. It's faster than the stairs." 25 terrifying minutes later, Yixmoth found himself standing on an open platform 90 stories above the ground, watching humans casually eat lunch while dangling their legs over the edge as if they weren't suspended above a lethal drop that could reduce them to biological paste. "Now this," said Tom, pointing to a worker operating some kind of controlled explosion device, "is where things get tricky. We're using shaped charges to clear some of the old foundation that's interfering with the new support structure. Jerry there is one of our best demolition experts." "Demolition?" Yixmoth watched in absolute horror as the human called Jerry approached what was clearly an active military-grade explosive device with the casual attitude of someone checking their mail. "That worker is voluntarily working with substances designed for warfare? Jerry? Nah, he's strictly civilian. Started as a coal miner, actually." Used to set off dynamite blasts to clear seams thousands of feet underground. Moved into construction when the mine closed down. Says he likes the fresh air and natural light. You use military explosives for resource extraction? How else would you do it? Can't exactly dig through solid rock with hand tools. Some of those coal seams are buried under hundreds of feet of stone and compressed earth. Yixmoth was beginning to understand why human mining operations were legendarily productive throughout the galaxy. They apparently treated controlled explosions as routine workplace activities. Mr. Rodriguez, perhaps you could show me some of your safety documentation? Injury reports, hazard assessments, emergency protocols? I need to understand how you manage risk in such an aggressive work environment. Sure thing. Fair warning though, our injury rates might seem a bit high compared to other worlds. Humans are kind of accident-prone, and we tend to push the boundaries of what's technically safe. An hour later, Yixmoth sat in the site office, staring at a computer screen filled with what humans apparently considered routine workplace incidents that would qualify as major disasters on any civilized world. Employee fell 15 feet after safety line snapped. He read aloud, his voice rising in pitch. Returned to work following weekend rest period. That worker came back after falling 15 feet onto concrete. Oh yeah, Mike's tough as nails. He was more annoyed about missing his bowling league than anything else. Said the fall was actually kind of fun once he got over the initial surprise. Employee exposed to industrial solvent. Experienced minor chemical burns over 30% of body surface. Resumed duties after bandaging. How is this classified as minor? Well, it was only second-degree burns, and mostly just on his hands and arms. Could have been much worse if he'd gotten it in his eyes or inhaled the fumes. Modern medicine is pretty amazing. They had him patched up and ready to work in a few days. Yixmoth continued scrolling through what appeared to be an endless catalog of human resilience in the face of industrial mayhem. Employee caught in machinery, suffered multiple lacerations and one compound fracture. Expected back next month. This person is still alive and planning to return. Oh sure, Rose is doing great. Modern medicine is incredible. They've got her arm all put back together with titanium pins and synthetic bone grafts. She jokes that she's part robot now and her new arm is actually stronger than the original. Titanium pins? You replace damaged biological structures with metal components. Yeah, pretty routine stuff. Sometimes they use carbon fiber or ceramic composites depending on the application. Rosa's thinking about getting a tattoo over the surgical scars to commemorate the experience. Yixmoth set down the tablet with trembling appendages. His worldview fundamentally altered. Mr. Rodriguez, I have to ask, what do humans consider to be a serious workplace injury? At what point do you actually worry about worker safety? Tom thought for a moment, his expression suggesting this was a complex philosophical question. I guess anything that puts you in the hospital for more than a month? Or if you lose a major limb and can't get it reattached. Death is obviously a concern, but that's pretty rare in modern construction work. Reattached? You can reconnect severed limbs? Yeah, if you get to the hospital fast enough and the injury is clean. They can sew arms and legs back on, reconnect all the blood vessels and nerves. Pretty amazing what medical science can do these days. That evening, Yixmoth filed his report with the Galactic Occupational Health Administration, his appendages shaking as he typed. The Galactic Tourism Board had sent their best cultural assessor, Threxlin, to evaluate Earth's potential as a vacation destination. As a Vorthan who had successfully raided pleasure worlds across 17 different star systems, from the crystal gardens of Nexra Prime to the floating spas of the Gelidian moons, she felt confident in her ability to assess any recreational environment. She was reconsidering that confidence while watching a human throw himself off a bridge with only an elastic cord tied to his ankles, screaming what she could only assume were final death prayers. This is what you call bungee jumping, explained her human guide, Alex Patterson, with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for discussing tax policy or root canal procedures. Pretty basic, thrill-seeking activity. Great for beginners who want to ease into extreme sports. Beginners. Threxlin's voice synthesis unit struggled to convey the full depth of her horror. This person has voluntarily jumped from a fatal height for entertainment purposes? Oh sure, the adrenaline rush is incredible. Fight or flight response kicks in, floods your system with natural stimulants. Better than any synthetic drug, and completely legal. Some people get so addicted to the rush they jump multiple times in a single day. Threxlin watched the human bounce up and down over what appeared to be a rocky river gorge filled with jagged stones, screaming with what she had initially assumed was terror but was apparently joy. And this is pleasurable? This produces positive emotional responses. Absolutely. The moment when the cord reaches maximum extension and you're hanging there, knowing you just cheated death by a few feet, there's nothing like it. Want to try it? I've got a spare harness. I want to leave. Immediately. Preferably to a world with lower gravity and fewer opportunities for voluntary death. Alex looked genuinely disappointed, as if she had declined an invitation to experience fine cuisine. Okay, maybe we should start with something more low-key. Something less intimidating for first-timers. How about rock climbing? An hour later, Threxlin found herself staring up at a sheer vertical cliff face as humans crawled up it like some kind of gravity-defying insects with apparent death wishes. The key is finding good handholds, Alex explained enthusiastically, pointing to tiny cracks in the rock face that appeared completely inadequate for supporting body weight. And trusting your equipment, of course. Though some purists prefer to free climb without any safety gear at all. Equipment? Threxlin asked weakly, noting that the safety systems appeared to consist of thin ropes that looked like they could snap under stress. Yeah, ropes and anchors. If you fall, you might drop 20 or 30 feet before the rope catches you. Creates quite a jolt when the line goes taut, but that's part of the excitement. If her voice rose to what humans might call a shriek. Well, assuming your gear doesn't fail. That's pretty rare though with modern climbing equipment. Maybe 1 in 10,000 climbs experiences total equipment failure. Threxlin watched a human slip, fall 20 feet, and slam into the rock face with a sickening impact before the rope finally arrested their descent. The human immediately began climbing again, laughing and calling out encouragement to their companions. That person just suffered what should be multiple bone fractures and internal organ damage, she whispered through her translator. Nah, Jessica's fine. Takes more than that to hurt her. She's been climbing since she was a kid. She free climbs El Capitan for fun during her vacations. What is El Capitan? 3,000-foot vertical granite wall in California. Takes most people 3 or 4 days to climb with full equipment and safety gear. Some folks do it without ropes entirely. Just their hands, feet, and a bag of chalk. Without ropes? Without any safety equipment whatsoever. Yeah, it's called free soloing. One mistake and you're definitely dead. But the pure feeling of it is supposed to be absolutely transcendent. Alex Honnold made it famous when he free soloed it in under 4 hours. Threxlin's species had developed a very simple relationship with heights. Anything over arm's length was to be avoided at all costs. The concept of voluntarily climbing a 3,000-foot cliff without safety equipment was so far beyond her comprehension that her brain simply refused to process it as a real activity. Perhaps, she said carefully, we could explore some less vertical recreational activities? Something that doesn't involve deliberate exposure to fatal drops. Sure. How about whitewater rafting? That's more horizontal. Mostly. 2 hours later, Threxlin was clinging to a small inflatable boat as it careened down a raging river filled with what humans cheerfully called Class 5 rapids. Apparently a rating system that went up to Class 6, which Alex explained was basically unrunnable and usually fatal. The trick is to read the water. Alex shouted over the roar of the current as their raft went completely airborne over a small waterfall, defying gravity for several terrifying seconds. See how it's all churned up and foamy? That means there are massive rocks down there that could crush the boat like an eggshell. Could crush the boat? Threxlin screamed back, her safety harness the only thing preventing her from being launched into the chaos. Yeah, but probably won't. This is actually a pretty tame run compared to some of the rivers in Colorado or the Zambezi. We avoid the really dangerous stuff unless you're an experienced rafter. Their raft slammed into a boulder the size of a small building, spun around 3 times, and launched sideways into what appeared to be a washing machine made of ice-cold water and sharp rocks. "Tame?" she shrieked as freezing water filled her breathing apparatus. "Oh sure. If you want real excitement, you should try the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Class 5 rapids for days, 100-foot drops, water so cold it can give you hypothermia in minutes. Now that's a ride that separates the tourists from the true adventurers." When they finally reached calmer water, Threxlin sat in stunned silence as Alex cheerfully pointed out the various ways they could have died during the past hour, rating each near-death experience on what appeared to be a complex scale of entertainment value. "So that was fun, right?" Alex asked as they dragged the raft onto the shore, apparently oblivious to the fact that Threxlin was experiencing what her species would classify as severe psychological trauma. "Ready for something a bit more challenging?" "More challenging?" Threxlin's voice came out as a barely audible squeak through her damaged translator. "Yeah, there's this great place about an hour from here where you can go skydiving. They take you up to about 15,000 feet in a perfectly functional aircraft and then you jump out of it. The free fall lasts about a minute before you open your parachute and hope it works properly. You jump out of aircraft? Deliberately? For recreational purposes. Best minute of your life. Though some people prefer base jumping if they want more of an adrenaline rush." "What is base jumping?" she asked, immediately regretting the question. "You jump off buildings, bridges, cliffs, antenna towers, that sort of thing. Much lower altitude than skydiving, so you don't have as much time before you have to open your chute. Higher margin for error, but the time pressure creates this incredible rush because you know that one small mistake means certain death." Threxlin stared at him in absolute incomprehension. "You have multiple forms of jumping off high places? This is an entire category of entertainment." "Oh sure. Wingsuit flying, paragliding, hang gliding, helicopter skiing, cave diving, volcano boarding. Humans have turned falling to our deaths into an art form. We've got extreme sports for every possible way to risk your life." That evening, Threxlin filed her report with the Galactic Tourism Board, her appendages shaking as she composed what might be the most unusual assessment in the organization's history. Earth completely unsuitable for standard tourism packages. Recommend immediate classification as extreme sports destination for thrill-seeking species only, preferably those with redundant vital organs and regenerative capabilities. Human recreational activities appear specifically designed to simulate mortal peril for entertainment purposes. Standard vacation experiences would likely result in complete psychological breakdown for most galactic species. Suggest mandatory psychological evaluation and comprehensive life insurance for any tourists expressing interest in human-style vacation experiences. Personal note: requesting immediate transfer to literally anywhere else in the galaxy, preferably somewhere with lower gravity, fewer creative ways to die, and recreational activities that don't involve voluntary proximity to death. Also strongly recommend hazard pay and trauma counseling for any assessors assigned to evaluate human recreational activities. Educator Prime Zithkar of the Galactic Educational Standards Council had evaluated learning institutions across the galaxy for over 30 cycles. From the crystalline memory libraries of Zirion Prime, where knowledge was downloaded directly into developing neural matrices, to the bioneural education chambers of the hive worlds where young minds were safely nurtured in controlled environments, she thought she understood the various approaches to knowledge transfer and youth development. Then she visited a human elementary school and discovered that everything she knew about education was apparently wrong. "Welcome to Roosevelt Elementary," chirped Mrs. Janet Morrison, a human who appeared to be in charge of 27 small humans, all of whom seemed to be in various states of barely controlled chaos. The juvenile humans were moving about freely, making loud vocalizations, and engaging in what appeared to be unsupervised physical contact. "The kids are really excited to meet a real alien." One of the small humans, Zithkar's scanner indicated it was only 6 Earth years old, barely past the larval stage by galactic standards, approached without any apparent fear and announced with startling directness. "My mom says you probably have different colored blood. Can we see it? Does it hurt when you bleed? Do you have the same number of hearts as us?" Timothy, remember what we talked about, Mrs. Morrison said gently but without any real authority. It's not polite to ask to see someone's internal fluids or inquire about their cardiovascular systems. Zithkar stared in mounting alarm. On any civilized world, the young of the species would be kept in heavily protected environments with constant medical monitoring until they reached mental and physical maturity. These human children were just wandering around freely in what appeared to be a completely uncontrolled environment. Mrs. Morrison, Zithkar began carefully. Are these juvenile humans adequately supervised? They appear to be operating without any safety restraints, protective barriers, or even basic behavioral modification devices. Oh, they're fine. Kids are tougher than they look. We believe in letting them explore and learn through experience rather than keeping them wrapped in protective barriers. As if to demonstrate this terrifying point, one of the small humans tripped while running at full speed, fell face-first onto a hard surface with an impact that should have caused serious cranial damage, bounced back up like some kind of resilient biological ball, and continued running as if nothing had happened. Blood was visible from a scraped knee, but the child seemed more concerned with rejoining whatever game was in progress. That child just sustained what should be a serious head injury and multiple lacerations, Zithkar observed, her scanning equipment registering impact forces that would hospitalize an adult of most species. Kids bounce, Mrs. Morrison said with a casual shrug that suggested this was completely normal. Their bones are still flexible and they heal incredibly fast. Tommy will probably forget about that scrape by lunchtime. Now, let me show you our playground. It's where the children develop gross motor skills and learn to assess physical risks. The playground was a mechanical nightmare of metal structures apparently designed to launch small humans into the air at dangerous velocities. Swings that could build up enough momentum to cause serious injury if the operator lost control. Slides that drop children from heights that would be fatal to most species. Something called monkey bars that seemed designed to test whether small humans could support their own body weight while dangling in the air above hard surfaces. This is where the children develop physical confidence and learn their personal limitations, Mrs. Morrison explained as a small human launched himself off something called a seesaw and executed what appeared to be an uncontrolled aerial maneuver before landing hard on the ground. We find that controlled exposure to risk helps them develop better judgment about what they can and can't do safely. Risk assessment? Zithkar watched another child hanging upside down from a metal bar, apparently by choice, while blood rushed to his developing brain. You teach them to deliberately place themselves in danger as part of their cognitive development? Well, how else would they learn their physical limitations? Tommy there is figuring out how long he can hang upside down before he gets dizzy and loses grip strength. It's a valuable lesson in personal physical awareness and cause and effect relationships. The child in question promptly lost his grip, fell approximately 4 feet onto his back, and lay still for several seconds. Zithkar was preparing to call for emergency medical assistance when the small human popped back up, shook his head to clear it, and ran off to attempt something even more dangerous looking. Is this normal behavior for developing humans? She asked weakly. Oh, absolutely. Kids need to test boundaries and push limits. It's how they develop independence, confidence, and risk assessment skills. We've found that children who are overprotected actually end up being more injury-prone as adults because they never learned to evaluate danger properly. They moved inside to observe what humans called science class, where Zithkar discovered that human children were encouraged to mix potentially dangerous chemicals, handle biological specimens that could carry pathogens, and conduct experiments involving electrical current. Today we're learning about static electricity and basic electrical principles, announced the teacher, Mr. Peterson, with obvious enthusiasm. Everyone pair up and we'll see who can build up the biggest charge using these wool cloths and plastic rods. The children began rubbing various materials together with obvious excitement. Within minutes, several of them were generating electrical discharges visible to the naked eye, their hair standing on end as current flowed through their small bodies. Mr. Peterson, Zithkar interrupted, are you certain it's safe to allow developing nervous systems to be exposed to electrical current? Their neural pathways are still forming. It's just static electricity. He laughed. apparently finding her concern amusing. Perfectly harmless educational fun. Watch this, Mr. Peterson approached a metal sphere connected to some kind of electrical generation device and touched it, causing his hair to stand on end as electrical current flowed through his entire body. The children found this hilarious and immediately wanted to try it themselves. You just conducted electricity through your central nervous system for entertainment, Zithkar stated, her voice rising to what humans might call a shriek. Yeah, it's fun. Want to try? The sensation is quite interesting. Later, Zithkar observed what humans called physical education, where children were encouraged to engage in activities that involved high-speed collisions, projectiles aimed at other children, and something called dodgeball that appeared to be combat training disguised as recreational activity. The goal is to help them develop hand-eye coordination, teamwork skills, and strategic thinking, explained Coach Williams as a small human was struck directly in the face by a rubber projectile and continued playing as if being hit by flying objects was perfectly normal. That child was just struck in the head with a projectile, Zithkar pointed out. Yeah, Jenny's got good reflexes. She almost caught it before it hit her face. She appears to be bleeding from her nasal cavity. Just a little nosebleed. Builds character and teaches them that minor injuries aren't the end of the world. During lunch period, Zithkar observed the human children consuming what appeared to be a variety of processed foods, including something called pizza, that seemed to consist primarily of dairy products, grains, and processed meats heated to temperatures that could cause severe burns to oral tissues. Do human children require such high-temperature nutrition? She asked, watching a child attempt to consume food that was literally steaming. Oh, they just like it hot, Mrs. Morrison replied. Though we do have to remind them not to burn their mouths. You'd be surprised how many kids will try to eat pizza straight out of the oven without waiting for it to cool down. They attempt to consume food at temperatures that would damage their oral tissues. Kids don't always think things through. That's why these experiences are so educational. They learn about consequences through direct experience rather than just being told about them. At the end of the day, Zithkar filed her preliminary report with the Galactic Educational Standards Council, her appendages trembling as she tried to make sense of what she had witnessed. Human educational system appears deliberately designed to expose developing minds to physical danger, chemical hazards, electrical current, and projectile impacts as standard pedagogical practice. Children are encouraged to engage in high-risk activities without adequate supervision or safety protocols. Paradoxically, this approach seems to produce remarkably capable and adaptable adult humans. Recommend extensive further study to understand how deliberate exposure to controlled danger enhances rather than impairs cognitive and physical development. Personal note: human children appear to be functionally indestructible. This may explain how their species survived to reach spaceflight capability on a Class 16+ Deathworld. Requesting immediate transfer to a species with a more sensible approach to education. Preferably one that doesn't involve allowing children to conduct electrical experiments, consume molten food, or engage in projectile-based combat as part of standard curriculum. Chief Medical Assessor VYTH Era of the Galactic Health Organization had reviewed medical practices on thousands of worlds across 47 star systems during her distinguished career. She had seen regeneration tanks that could regrow entire limbs, nanomedical systems that could repair cellular damage at the molecular level, and even quantum healing matrices that could reverse entropy itself within living tissue. She thought she understood the absolute limits of biological medicine and the sacred principles of, first, do no harm. She was not prepared for what humans casually referred to as surgery. Dr. Martinez, could you explain this procedure you call cardiac surgery? She asked, staring at a holographic display showing the inside of a human chest cavity that looked like a biological nightmare of pumping organs and flowing fluids. Specifically, this triple bypass operation? Dr. Elena Martinez smiled with the confidence of someone who routinely performed what should be impossible procedures. Of course, in this case, we're dealing with a patient whose coronary arteries are severely blocked with plaque buildup. So we're going to cut open his chest with a bone saw, crack his ribs apart with mechanical spreaders, stop his heart completely, redirect all blood flow through an external machine, and then sew new blood vessels harvested from his legs around the blocked areas. Viwaitechera's medical scanner immediately began screaming warnings loud enough to wake the dead. Dr. Martinez, you just described deliberately stopping the patient's primary circulatory pump, opening his thoracic cavity, and performing major reconstructive surgery on non-functioning organs. That should result in immediate and irreversible death. Well, yes, if we didn't have a heart-lung machine to keep the blood oxygenated and flowing to his brain, Dr. Martinez explained as if this made perfect sense. We basically turn the patient into a temporarily dead body while we perform the repairs. His heart stops beating, he stops breathing on his own, and we take over all his vital functions with machines. Temporarily dead? Viwaitechera's voice reached a pitch that probably qualified as a medical emergency itself. Technically, his heart isn't beating and his lungs aren't functioning, so by most definitions he's clinically dead during the procedure. But the machines keep oxygen flowing to his brain and other organs, so it's fine. We can keep him in this state for hours if necessary. Viwaitechera stared at the human doctor in absolute incomprehension. You routinely kill your patients as part of standard medical procedures? Only temporarily, and it's very safe these days with modern technology. Mortality rates for routine cardiac surgery are below 2%, which is remarkably good considering we're essentially performing controlled resurrection. 2% of your patients die when you deliberately stop their hearts and open their chest cavities? Well, it's usually complications rather than the procedure itself. Sometimes the heart doesn't want to restart properly, or there's excessive bleeding that we can't control, or infection sets in at the surgical site, or the patient has an unexpected reaction to anesthesia. Dr. Martinez seemed to notice Viwaitechera's mounting distress, indicated by the fact that her breathing apparatus was now cycling at emergency frequencies. Maybe we should start with something simpler and less invasive? How about orthopedic surgery? An hour later, Viwaitechera watched in absolute horror as a human surgeon used what appeared to be industrial carpentry tools to cut through living bone with mechanical precision. This is a total hip replacement, Dr. Martinez explained with cheerful enthusiasm. We remove the damaged bone and cartilage from the patient's hip joint, then use hammers, chisels, and power tools to shape the remaining bone structure before hammering in metal and plastic components. Hammer! Viwaitechera watched as the surgeon literally used a hammer and chisel on the patient's femur, striking it with enough force to shatter stone. You're using construction tools on living tissue? Oh, absolutely. Orthopedic surgery is often more like skilled carpentry than traditional medicine. You should see a knee replacement. We use power saws to cut through the bone, grinders to shape the surfaces, and hydraulic presses to fit the new joint components. Power saws? You use industrial cutting equipment on conscious patients. Well, they're unconscious during the surgery, but yes. Sometimes you need serious tools to cut through bone precisely. It's actually pretty fascinating from an engineering perspective. We're essentially rebuilding the human skeletal system using metal and ceramic components. Viwaitechera was beginning to suspect that human medicine was less about healing and more about controlled destruction followed by mechanical reconstruction using industrial equipment. Dr. Martinez, perhaps you could show me some less invasive procedures? Something that doesn't involve power tools or induce death. Sure. Let's check out our trauma bay. Great place to see emergency human medicine in action. The trauma bay was organized chaos that looked like a battlefield hospital. Humans with various injuries were being treated with what appeared to be barely controlled violence. One patient was having metal staples driven into his scalp to close a wound that would require delicate suturing on any civilized world. Another was screaming as medical staff manually manipulated what was clearly a broken bone back into proper alignment. Busy night, Dr. Martinez commented with satisfaction. Car accident, bar fight, industrial accident, and someone fell off a construction site. Pretty typical for a Friday evening in the city. These are typical injuries for humans? Viwaitechera asked, watching a medical technician prepare what appeared to be a needle the size of a small spear. Oh sure, humans are incredibly accident-prone. We see everything from paper cuts to chainsaw injuries on a regular basis. Chainsaw injuries? Yeah, tree work mostly, though sometimes home improvement projects go wrong. You'd be amazed what people will try to cut with a chainsaw when they don't have the proper tools. HFY watched as the medical technician approached a conscious patient with the enormous needle. What is that instrument of torture? Bone marrow biopsy needle. We're going to drill into his hip bone and extract some marrow for testing. It's a bit uncomfortable, but necessary to check if his cancer treatment is working. You drill into bones? While the patient is conscious and aware. Well, we use local anesthetic to numb the area. Still hurts quite a bit, but it's better than putting him under general anesthesia for such a simple procedure. The patient, who was indeed conscious and watching the proceedings with remarkable calm, seemed to be taking the prospect of having his bone drilled into with the same attitude most species would reserve for minor inconveniences. Sir, HFY addressed the patient directly. Are you not concerned about this invasive procedure? The human shrugged with apparent indifference. Had it done 6 times before. Not fun, but beats dying of leukemia. You've had this procedure performed 6 times? Voluntarily? Docs got to monitor the cancer treatment somehow. Small price to pay for staying alive. Later, Dr. Martinez showed her the pediatric ward, where HFY discovered that humans performed major surgery on their own young without apparent psychological trauma. This little guy needs his tonsils removed. Martinez explained, indicating a small human who couldn't be more than 5 Earth years old. Simple procedure. We just cut them out of his throat while he's unconscious. You perform invasive surgery on juveniles? HFY's voice reached a pitch that probably qualified as a shriek. Oh sure. Kids actually heal faster than adults and bounce back from anesthesia really quickly. Plus, removing infected tonsils now prevents serious complications later. The small human looked up at HFY with bright, curious eyes that showed no fear whatsoever. Are you a robot? He asked with innocent directness. No, I'm an alien from another world. HFY replied automatically. Cool. Do you have different colored blood like on TV? Timothy. Dr. Martinez laughed. We talked about this with the other visitors, remember? At the end of her evaluation shift, HFY filed her report with the Galactic Health Organization, her appendages shaking as she tried to document the impossible. Human medical practice consists primarily of controlled trauma designed to repair naturally occurring trauma. Standard procedures include deliberate cardiac arrest, bone removal and replacement with metal components, drilling into skeletal structures while patients remain conscious, and the use of industrial power tools on living tissue. Remarkably, this aggressive approach appears to be highly effective. Human life expectancy continues to increase despite medical interventions that should theoretically be fatal to any known species. Recommend immediate reclassification of human medical practice as aggressive life support engineering, rather than traditional healing methodologies. Standard medical protocols should absolutely not be applied to human patients without extensive consultation with human medical professionals. Personal note: requesting immediate transfer to any species with a more sensible approach to healthcare, preferably one that doesn't involve hammering metal objects into living bone or temporarily killing patients as routine medical procedure. Also strongly recommend trauma counseling and hazard pay for any medical assessors assigned to evaluate human hospitals. 6 months after first contact, representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy gathered for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber, built to accommodate beings of every conceivable shape and size, buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 1,000 worlds shared their increasingly alarming reports on humanity and their impossible homeworld. Council Prime Kethzar, an ancient being whose species had overseen galactic classification systems for millennia, called for order with multiple appendages raised high. Fellow beings, we are here to address the unprecedented situation presented by the species known as humans and their homeworld, designated Earth. The chamber fell silent except for the mechanical whirring of countless life support systems, each one maintaining the delicate environmental conditions required to keep various alien species alive in one shared space. Ambassador Kethvar stepped forward to the central speaking platform, his breathing apparatus functioning at maximum capacity and his environmental suit displaying stress readings that would be concerning under normal circumstances. Honorable Council members, after 6 months of extensive observation and documentation, I must formally request a complete reclassification of Earth and its inhabitants. A ripple of anticipation ran through the chamber, accompanied by various species-specific sounds of concern. Clicks, whistles, harmonics, and electronic tones that created a symphony of interstellar anxiety. The initial classification of Earth as a Class 15 Deathworld was... Kethvar paused, consulting his notes with trembling manipulators. Catastrophically inadequate. Our preliminary observations suggested a minimum classification of Class 16, but subsequent investigation has revealed that even our most extreme categories are insufficient to properly describe this world. Chief Medical Assessor VYTH Era approached the speaking platform, her own life support system cycling at emergency frequencies. Esteemed council members, human medical practices alone suggest their homeworld produces beings adapted to survive trauma that would be instantly fatal to any known species. They routinely survive procedures that we would classify as elaborate torture designed to cause maximum suffering. She activated a holographic display showing human surgical procedures that caused several council members to activate their emergency stress response protocols. They deliberately stop their hearts, cut open their bodies with power tools, and drill into their bones while conscious. They consider this routine healthcare. Safety Inspector Yixmoth joined her, his scanner still occasionally beeping warnings despite being in the heavily protected council chamber. The human approach to workplace safety indicates a species that considers lethal danger to be a minor inconvenience requiring only basic precautions. Their construction workers operate at heights and under conditions that would require immediate evacuation protocols and psychological intervention on any civilized world. Cultural Assessor Threxlin stepped forward shakily, her report tablet clutched in appendages that hadn't stopped trembling since her return from Earth. Most disturbing of all, their recreational activities are functionally indistinguishable from elaborate suicide attempts performed for entertainment. They deliberately seek out mortal peril as a source of pleasure, and consider activities that should cause instant death to be relaxing vacation experiences. A collective gasp arose from the assembled representatives, followed by frantic interspecies communication as various delegations tried to process this information. Educator Prime Zithkar nodded grimly, her own report displaying holographic images of human children engaging in activities that would hospitalize adults from most species. Perhaps most terrifying of all, they train their young by exposing them to controlled danger from the earliest stages of development. Human children are encouraged to engage in activities that would require emergency medical intervention for mature adults of most galactic civilizations. Council Prime Kethzar raised a primary manipulator for silence, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia of interstellar experience. The evidence presented suggests that our current classification system is fundamentally inadequate for describing Earth and its inhabitants. What recommendations do our assessors propose? Ambassador Kethvar consulted his increasingly frantic notes. Council Prime, based on our collective observations, I propose the creation of an entirely new classification category. Earth should not be designated as a Class 16 Deathworld. It transcends our current understanding of what constitutes a hostile environment. What classification do you propose? Kethzar asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer would challenge their fundamental understanding of habitability. Class 20 Apocalypse World, minimum, Kethvar announced, causing an immediate uproar throughout the chamber. Possibly Class 25 Reality Violation. Earth appears to be a world where the normal laws of biology, physics, and common sense have been suspended. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives from various species began frantically updating their databases and contact protocols. Several delegations immediately activated emergency communication systems to warn their homeworlds about the apparent impossibility of human existence. Chief Medical Assessor VYTH Era stepped forward again. Council Prime, I must add that humans appear to be not just surviving on this apocalypse world, but actively thriving. They have turned environmental hostility into a source of entertainment, personal growth, and technological advancement. More concerning, added Safety Inspector Yixmoth, They seem to consider their environment normal and express genuine confusion when other species find their daily existence terrifying. They appear to lack any basic survival instincts that would be considered fundamental to intelligent life. Cultural assessor Threxlin activated her display again, showing footage of humans engaged in various recreational activities. Council members, they have industrialized the pursuit of near-death experiences. They have created entire economic sectors devoted to activities that should be biologically impossible. Council Prime Kethzar surveyed the assembled representatives, noting that several species had activated emergency protocols and were preparing to evacuate the chamber despite being in one of the safest locations in the galaxy. Given this unprecedented situation, what contact protocols do we establish with humanity? Ambassador Kethvar straightened his environmental suit with obvious effort. Council Prime, I recommend extreme caution in all future human contact. Any diplomatic missions should be classified as hazardous duty, requiring extensive psychological preparation and emergency medical support. Additionally, added Educator Prime Zithkar, we should establish specialized educational programs to help galactic species understand human behavior. Standard xenobiology training appears to be completely inadequate for preparing beings to interact with humans. Council Prime Kethzar nodded slowly, his ancient mind processing the implications of a species that had evolved beyond the normal constraints of biological possibility. Very well. Let the record show that Earth is hereby reclassified as a Class 25 reality violation apocalypse world, and humanity is designated as a category unknown species requiring specialized contact protocols. He paused, considering the full implications of what they had discovered. Furthermore, let it be noted that humanity represents the first known case of a species that has not merely survived on an apocalypse world, but has thrived to the point of developing spaceflight capability while maintaining recreational activities that would be classified as weapons of mass destruction on most civilized worlds. The chamber fell silent as the full weight of this designation settled over the assembled representatives. Council dismissed, Kethzar announced, and may whatever deities you worship have mercy on our understanding of what constitutes normal life in this universe. As representatives from across the galaxy filed out of the chamber, many were already updating their species' contact databases with a simple but profound notation. Humans. Approach with extreme caution. Reality may not apply.